Hi, everybody. I'm Dennis Daly. I spent 20 years with United Press International, most of it with the old UPI Radio Network. And my favorite assignment was going on the road producing and hosting American Montage. It was an hour-long weekly program. Now here's an edited version of one of those shows. Hi, everybody. We're on the road again, this time in one of my favorite cities, Minneapolis, actually in suburban Minneapolis at the headquarters of General Mills. We're inside the big General Mills headquarters building in the Betty Crocker Test Kitchens. My guest this week is Ann Parrish. If you love to bake bread and own a bread maker, you've probably seen Ann's name. She is one of the nation's foremost experts on bread making, specifically in bread making machines. I sat down and talked to Ann about the history of the modern-day bread maker, when it all started, and how the craze developed.
History tells us, as well as it can, is that it was sometime around 1987 began coming into America to make bread using a machine and the push of a button. And some of those machines were very expensive, and some of those machines were only slightly expensive. And there's a great debate as to whose machine came first, but the bottom line is that when people began tracking the number of units, in 1988 there were about 150,000 units sold. By 1991 there were about 1 million bread machines in America, and today there are about 18 million, or by the end of this year, that's the estimate. So what that tells us is that in less than 10 years there has been a very quiet but large revolution taking place in kitchens. In 1991, a group of Alaskans who had quite a bit of business experience, some capital, and bread machines in their home took a look at this particular industry and said, I wonder if anyone is taking it seriously. And so we decided to do some market research, and we called people like Gold Medal and Panasonic and Well-Built and DAC, and we talked to them about whether or not, if someone were to establish a research facility and look at what happened when you combine recipe, flour, and yeast with a product, whether or not they would like to participate. And they said yes, and we said good, because we want to create recipes that work in all machines. And so that was the beginning. And in 1991, our test kitchen, which was set up to conduct that research, baked about 4,000 loaves, and we created a book that has now become fairly well known across America called Electric Bread. And it's available from Walmart to Williams-Sonoma, from Barnes & Noble to the smallest bookstore in your rural hometown. And it has become somewhat the Bible for people who have bread machines in their home. And it takes people who have never made bread with a bread machine before, from new technology to fresh, flavorful loaves.
I guess the question to ask at the beginning there is, how important was it to find some kind of standard that would work on all of those machines? Because I guess as a layman, I had the misconception that they were all pretty much the same, just looked different on the outside.
That's true in terms of, I guess, that they all make bread, but because making bread is actually a science, what we found is when Mary Kiesling, who was one of the co-founders of the company with myself, tried a recipe in her machine that was in the book that came with mine, it didn't work, and vice versa. So we knew that it was similar to the situation of the microcomputers when they were first introduced and there was no standard operating system out there. And greedy people that we were, we thought that in the event that bread machines ever took hold in America, it might be nice to have, to be the Microsoft for bread machines. So that's why we put our money on the line and founded Innovative Cooking, so that we could abbreviate it and call it ICE.
We're in the test kitchen with Ann Parrish, who is president of Innovative Cooking. I mentioned to Ann that in the early days of bread-making machines coming to the U.S., mostly from Japan, they were perceived as kind of being something that only wealthy people bought, and that the industry had to put a neat spin on it from the beginning to convince people to make it a home appliance that would be part of their everyday life.
That's right. I mean, even within the manufacturers of the bread machine, there was doubt because they couldn't believe that anyone would spend that kind of money for an appliance to set on your counter. They were having trouble selling much smaller appliances at lower prices. What they did not anticipate was the satisfaction and emotional attachment that comes with producing bread. And it surprised the manufacturers of the machine. It surprised the people who bought them. I can tell you that I had my first bread machine purchased by my husband against my will. And so I guess I'm probably living proof that you can be wrong. But what we know is that all of us look at any appliance with some level of distrust because the promises have not fulfilled to our expectation. And we were all surprised when we got this one home, and it not only did what it said it was going to do, it did more, it did it very conveniently, and it produced a product that we were not able to make ourselves.
There's so many things to talk about here, but one of the things I've noticed is the evolution of, and I hate to use this word, the specificity of what the machines will do. The early machines were very, very basic, but now we're getting into an era where you can have different size, different shape loaves. Some of them will add ingredients later. It's really a time, I think, when, if I can put words in your mouth, where people need to look again at what's available out there.
Well, when we founded the test kitchen in that first 4,000 loaves, we were using 17 machines. On Wednesday, when I left Anchorage, Alaska, the test kitchen was baking with 44 machines of the about 220 that we now have in our possession. And they were on their 24,000 and something loaf. They were baking chocolate that day, by the way, and it smelled like a chocolate chip cookie factory. But the variety out there is definitely there. There's everything from a simple machine to a complex machine, and each person, as they're looking at choosing a machine, needs to think about, what am I really going to use this bread machine for? I guess the latest, let me share some new innovations with you. Toastmaster has a new bread machine out that has a breadstick maker in it.
Wow.
There's a new machine that's available from both Breadman and from Breadman that has 64 different programmable cycles where you can do pasta, you can do bread dough. It has a special compartment in the machine that allows you to drop fruit and nuts at a special time. There are machines with yeast dispensers, there are machines with time-bake cycles, but the important thing to remember in all of this, Dennis, is that whatever machine you choose, what you're really looking for is the bread. And you shouldn't get confused between the buying decision, because once you've owned a bread machine, you're going to know a lot more about which one you want to buy next time. It's sort of like, your first car teaches you a lot. Do you really need push-button windows or not?
Well, now, we at the office have had 4 DAC machines over the years, and we're probably, I think, one of the first offices which started baking bread every day, and the executives would come over and say, why are you doing this? It smells wonderful. Is there anything that is more basic, that smacks of family and brings back memories, particularly if you're old enough to have had a mother or a grandmother who baked bread by hand, than does baking bread?
No, and I have this theory after listening to the people on our 800 line for the last 6.5 years that there's a very special relationship between human beings and bread. It's borderline spiritual and definitely emotional. And there's something that happens when that aroma triggers and the flavor is there. For those of us who have lost a piece of our life that seemed simple and safe and sound, this bread, when we smell it, makes us feel that way at home. When we wake up to it, or when we come home from a busy day at work and the house is full of the aroma of fresh bread, and we can zip open the top of one of those easy, quick salad bags that we picked up at the grocery store and feel like we've fixed a meal for our family, even though we didn't have time to do it.
And there you have it, another edited episode of one of the American Montage programs prepared for the UPI Radio Network back in the 1980s and 90s. I'm Dennis Daly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for going with me this week. And check YouTube for more American Montage programs.